Modern user interfaces, whether they be for apps or websites, commonly offer users the choice between light and dark modes. Dark mode in particular has many potential benefits, like saving battery life and reducing eye strain in low light environments. Dark mode is even an accessibility feature for some users, helping them with light-triggered migraine problems. Other users just prefer it for aesthetic reasons. Nowadays, most operating systems let users enable a dark mode. Some apps sense when this happens and respond accordingly. Other apps delegate this decision directly to users, allowing them to choose when and where to switch modes. Either way, there are many ways to implement these different modes in an app. For example, you could do it using CSS style sheets or custom properties or even more sophisticated design systems. Unfortunately, no matter which method you choose, there can be a lot of overhead to implement and maintain these different modes in an app. However, there are some potential shortcuts. In this video, I'll describe one simple way to implement a dark mode in Hype apps. This is done with a single CSS filter effect and can be achieved with a minimum of fuss, no matter how big or complicated your project becomes or how much it changes over time. If that sounds interesting to you, let's get into the details. So here is a sample Hype project I've created to illustrate how to implement this dark mode effect. It includes a background element, a label, some simple decorations, and a single button to switch between modes. Later, we'll expand this project to include other kinds of elements, but for now, let's just look at how this effect works. If I click the button, you can see how the user interface switches between light and dark modes. So how is this being accomplished? Well, behind the scenes, there's a small amount of code running in the background. That code includes a class that applies the CSS filter effect called Invert. Predictably, this filter effect inverts the colors in each element. So white becomes black and vice versa. I've added this CSS code to Hype's document head, and that looks like this. Additionally, there's a single JavaScript function that applies or removes this class from all elements in the scene. This function is called toggle dark mode, and it looks like this. Don't worry too much about the details of this code. I've included a link in the description to the final sample project so that you can examine it in greater detail and potentially adapt it for your own purposes. With this code in place, clicking on the button runs the toggle dark mode function, which adds or removes this class, depending on the current state of the user interface. This state is being tracked by a single variable called mode. I set up that variable in a different function that runs when the scene first loads. That function is very small and looks like this. So that's great if everything in your user interface is black or white, but obviously, things are more complicated than that. Let's see what happens if we add an image to the user interface. Ouch. That completely distorted all the colors in the image. Obviously, that's not what we want. For this reason, we need a way to protect this image during the switch to dark mode. In fact, we need a way to exclude all images from the changes we're making to the broader user interface. We can do that by creating a second class called exclude from mode switch. That new class looks like this. It's effectively the opposite of the dark mode class. Next, we need a way to apply this class so that it overrides the global dark mode class. We can do that by applying it directly to the image in the identity inspector, like this. By doing this, the new class has a higher specificity and overrides the other classes. Now, if we switch between light and dark mode, the image is unaffected, which is what we want. But this does raise another important issue. Exactly what will happen to colors in the user interface other than black and white? How are they going to be affected? We need a way to change these colors in a systematic fashion that enhances the appearance of our interface rather than disrupting it. One way to do this is by using the CSS filter method hue rotation. To understand how this works, you need to know a little about HSL color space. HSL stands for hue, saturation, and lightness, and is a hue-based representation of the RGB color space. You are probably familiar with specifying colors using RGB or hex values. HSL is a little different, and some say more intuitive. This is because the HSL model allows you to select a base hue from a continuous color wheel and make a logical adjustment from there. Choosing a hue is a simple matter of selecting a spot on this color wheel. For example, red is at 0 degrees, blue is at 240 degrees, etc. The hue rotation filter method simply adjusts that hue value by moving a set number of degrees around this wheel. For example, specifying a hue rotation of 120 degrees changes red to green. We can use this method to make subtle adjustments to the colors in our user interface that match the switch to dark mode. We do that by adding this hue rotation method to our original dark mode class, like this. Now, if we add some representative color swatches to our project and switch between modes, you can see these changes in hue nicely match the shift to a dark background. The ideal magnitude of this hue rotation will depend on the colors you choose for your user interface and your own creativity. So, this is the current status of the additions to our document head with an expanded dark mode class and an exclude from mode switch class that protects elements we don't want to be affected during a change to dark mode. And we know this works with simple elements and decorations, but what about more complicated elements like videos and iframes? Like images, these are elements that we don't want to disrupt by inverting or otherwise changing their colors. With this in mind, you would want to apply the exclude from mode switch class to these element types. When we do that, our sample project performs as expected. For example, if we embed a YouTube video, you can see how it plays as you would expect with no color changes or disruption to its playback when we switch modes. You might be wondering whether this technique works in all the main browsers and on mobile devices. Looking at the data on CSS Filter effects from the Can I Use website, you can see a very high level of coverage, almost 98%, among the major browsers. Internet Explorer is the only significant omission, and as time progresses, that is becoming less and less of a problem. Even in the small number of browsers that don't support CSS filter effects, users will still be presented with a perfectly acceptable light mode display. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed this brief introduction to implementing a simple dark mode in Hype apps. If you are interested to learn more about the neat things you can do with Hype, please check out my YouTube channel for other related videos. If you are interested to learn more about other things we are working on, please check out our website at alteredmindware.com or contact me directly at alteredmindware@gmail.com.